white rural voters are apparently an existential threat to the country. That's according to authors Tom Schaller and Paul Waldman in their new book, White Rural Rage, The Threat to American Democracy. Speaking with MSNBC's Morning Joe host Mika Brzezinski, Schaller explained why he thinks this voting bloc is just so dangerous. Spoiler alert, it's because they're racist. Let's watch.
They're the most racist, xenophobic, anti-immigrant, and anti-gay geodemographic group in the country. Second, they're the most conspiracist group. QAnon support and subscribers, election denialism, COVID denialism, and scientific skepticism.
Schaller later added he believed rural America doesn't believe in a free press, are more likely to be white nationalists, and more likely to be Christian nationalists.
Paul Waldman noted that endemic problems in white rural communities, including less economic opportunity, plus poor education and infrastructure, fueled rage among the bloc, which the authors claim Donald Trump capitalized on and helped channel. Listen.
When Donald Trump came along, he didn't do any of that stuff. He was just a conduit for their rage, their anger, their resentment. And that turned out to be what they wanted. And it wasn't really about the material conditions of their lives.
Both make the case that rural voters will only see a revitalization of their communities if they introduce a pan-racial non-white population instead of relying on false promises by Donald Trump. So I have lived in rural, predominantly white American towns for months at a time. It's not where I grew up, but I have lived there. I understand the communities to some degree. And this kind of thinking is precisely where the rage comes from. Like, it's really not that they have this rage naturally. It's when you have people talking about politics as if there are communities of people that are not making electoral decisions about who to vote for, if their ideology is not informed by the same thinking as them, that they must be less than you. This kind of liberal elite mindset is where a lot of the rage comes from, to be completely honest. There's also a rage of being left behind by industry in the United States of America, having huge company towns be the victims of companies leaving and the entire economy is destroyed. The oligopolies of our country leading to labor markets being dominated by just a few corporations that keep wages incredibly low and the quality of life low in rural areas. The corporate farming that we've seen take over so many small farms in rural areas. There's a number of things that lead to rage, and to just sort of blame people for conditions that are not the creation of their own and say that it's simply the racism that produces the rage is to overlook the problems of our country that make people angry, quite frankly. And so this way of thinking, I think, is really just destructive.
Yeah, it shows a complete contempt for a lot of Americans from this liberal elite, city-based, less religious group that frankly is out of step with the majority of Americans on most issues. And because they're so angry that people who actually work for a living, frankly, I mean, these guys wrote a book and claimed that they did something, actually work hard for a living. If they don't believe in the same things that they believe, that they're a threat to democracy, how exactly is it a threat to democracy for someone to vote for someone you don't like? It's just fundamentally ridiculous. It's the exact same argument that's being used to take Trump off of the ballot in various states. And I appreciate your perspective on this, Jessica. I did grow up in rural white America, I guess you could say. I grew up in a small town of 5,000 before moving to a smaller town of between 500 and 1,000 population. My dad was a plumber for his entire life. My mom worked at a video store before becoming a full-time homemaker. I grew up hunting, fishing, and we're exactly the type of people that they're talking about and accusing of being xenophobic, racist, not believing in a free press, being white nationalist, among a whole other of, frankly, I think, racist stereotypes about people who come from rural America. And for MSNBC to even air this segment is just disgusting. I've also noticed that the media recently has really been harping on this term Christian nationalists, which they can't even seem to define between one day and the next the same way. Recently, we had a Politico reporter by the name of Heidi Przybyla go on, I believe it was also MSNBC, and she said that Christian nationalism is when you believe that your rights come from God, not government, which was the foundation of the founding of America. So I guess she thinks that the founding fathers were also all Christian nationalists, which we know not all of them were Christian. Thomas Jefferson formed the basis of the Declaration of Independence on the idea that humans are endowed with unalienable rights by their creators. And so it seems like they're just throwing out all of these fear-mongering buzzwords, because as we get down to the fundamentals, exactly as you said, Jessica, these people are just angry that they're not able to, get their propaganda all the way to people in rural America, and people in rural America aren't buying what they're selling. And instead of looking inward and asking if they themselves are the problem, they say, no, it must be these people because they don't vote the way that I want them to.
It seems to me that these two guys didn't go through the intellectual exercise of saying, what's the purpose of my book? What is this book for? This book is, it's obvious to me, is for liberals who want to blame someone else for the state of American politics. They want to be mad at white rural voters and say, that's why the country is so messed up. We're doing everything we can by casting a ballot every 4 years in a general election, and even showing up to midterms. Wow, we're doing everything we can to make the country a better place. No, absolutely not. That's not how it works. When you have these liberal elites saying to the general population of the United States of America that they're not making well-informed political decisions with the same access to information as them, you're just assuming you're better than everyone else. And that's really the crisis of our democracy, is the assumption that the rule of law can be dictated by a few elites for everyone else. The idea of populism has been talked about as if it's this kind of dirty, terrible ideology, as if having majority rule in a democracy is the worst thing ever. And of course, we know that our country was designed so that there were some checks and balances and we wouldn't have, the tyranny of the majority. But to some degree, when you talk about populism in a way where you're speaking about the working class of America as if they're so uneducated, they shouldn't be charged with making political decisions, that's really the enemy of democracy, isn't it, at the end of the day? When you think the majority of the American people are not smart enough to cast a ballot in a direction in their own interest, that, I think, really is where liberals need to reflect on their own purpose for writing books like this, and the thinking really behind their own political ideology and the way they talk about the working class, especially when it comes to politics.
It's just a classic case of these people getting high on their own supply. And it also comes with this inherent bias toward college-educated Americans, which is fine. I understand that, they want more people to go to college because then they feel like they're going to become more liberal and they're more likely to vote for them. But just because someone didn't go to college doesn't mean that they're any less intelligent or capable of forming opinions than someone who did go to college. And I think in some cases, college makes people a lot dumber, just based on my own experience. But it's just fascinating to see how these city-based liberal elites continuously discount people who, on a daily basis, literally make this country run. It's rural white Americans that fight their wars, that farm their food, that drill their oil, that mine their coal, and they, instead of being grateful for the fact that these people literally sacrifice their bodies, their lives, their time in order to participate in these very valuable professions, they sit there and sneer at them and treat them like they're pieces of crap and like they're less than them. And it always infuriates me, just again, growing up in a town like the one that they're talking about, with people like the ones that they're degrading, to know that those are some of the best people that I know in my whole life. A lot of them are my family members. I would like to be able to tell these guys to their face what I think about them, because I can assure you that they are significantly worse people than the ones that they're on national television talking badly about.
Yeah, as someone who grew up working class in the U.S., I mean, my parents live in a rural area now. When I think about the fear and rage of the working class, the rage is about the economy being captured by America's biggest corporations. When you have 10%, the top 10% of the country owning 93% of the stocks in the United States, when we have the wealth disparity, the extent that it's grown in the past 10 years, just since the COVID pandemic, where you have the top 5 richest people doubling their wealth, you have them acquiring money at a rate of $14 million an hour. That's insane. That's why working class people are angry, and their fear is about making ends meet and having more people elected into public office that perpetuate or worsen the material conditions in the United States of America. And when I think about fear and rage, I really think about people like these two authors. Quite frankly, I think they're fearful that if there are changes made to the way our economy is structured, that they will lose their very comfortable way of life, that they will then too have to work like the working class people, and they believe they're better than that. Isn't that rage in itself, to want to perpetuate a system of oppression because you think you're better than other people and you're outraged that they think they should have a fair share as well? So that's really how I see people like this. I don't know why you would write a book like this unless you only wanted to validate that point of view, because what other purpose does it serve to provide this analysis to the world?
Yeah, they are exactly that. They are projecting their fear and their rage on the people who have the capability of changing the way things are done in this country if they so choose, which was part of the protest vote for Donald Trump in 2016. And then I would also just add on to what you said about the economy, that it's liberal Republicans and Democrats on both sides of the aisle that for decades voted to outsource manufacturing to countries where they could exploit cheaper labor, like in China. And we were told repeatedly by libertarians, by the liberal left, that we should do this because it actually helps the working class, because then the tchotchkes that they buy from Walmart are less expensive. Not, I guess, considering the fact that they can't buy any tchotchkes if they can't afford for food, rent, mortgage, or other things, because their entire industry has been wiped out and they don't have easily transferable skills in order to go to another industry. But the liberal media likes to tell us that those people can just learn to code. We'll be back with more Rising after this.